Every morning, the building woke up before most of the people inside it did. Lights flickered on one by one. Doors opened and closed. The sound of footsteps echoed across the long floors. And before anyone important arrived, he was already there. He pushed his cleaning cart slowly down the hallway, stopping at the same places every day. Trash bins, dusty corners, fingerprints on glass doors. His movements were careful and quiet, almost like he was trying not to disturb the space itself. Most people passed by without looking at him. Some nodded out of habit. Others didn't notice him at all. To them, he was just the janitor. They didn't know when he arrived or when he left. They didn't ask where he came from or what his life looked like once the uniform came off. His job made him invisible, and after a while he learned to live with that. Sometimes people laughed when they thought he couldn't hear. They joked about his old shoes or the way he hummed softly while he worked. A few spoke loudly on purpose, making comments that stung more than they realized. He never replied. He never complained. He simply kept cleaning. He had learned long ago that silence was safer. During breaks, he sat alone near the back in trance, drinking tea from a worn cup he carried with him every day. He watched people rush past, busy with their own lives. Important meetings, big dreams, loud conversations. He wondered how many of them ever stopped to listen. His life hadn't turned out the way he once imagined. Years ago, when he was much younger, he believed his future would look different. He believed talent and hard work were enough. But life has a way of changing plans without asking permission. Money became tight. Responsibilities grew heavier. Dreams were pushed aside not because they died, but because survival came first. So he took the job that was available. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Just until things improved. Just until the next opportunity came. But days became months, and months turned into years. Slowly, the uniform felt permanent. Still, there was one thing he never let go of. Music. He heard it everywhere, even when there was none playing. In the rhythm of footsteps. In the hum of machines. In the quiet moments between sounds. Music lived inside him, waiting. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, when most people were busy elsewhere, he passed by a large room with a piano sitting in the corner. It wasn't always in use. Often, it just sat there, silent, covered in dust. Each time he walked past it, his steps slowed. He never stopped completely, never touched it. He only looked, like someone staring through a window at a life they once knew. He remembered the first time he had ever touched a piano. The keys felt cold and smooth under his fingers. The sound startled him, then pulled him in. It felt like the instrument understood him in a way people never had. Those memories stayed with him, even as the years moved on. Now, standing in a hallway with a mop in his hand, he kept those memories locked away. The building didn't need to know his story. The people inside wouldn't care anyway. Or so he believed. One afternoon, as he wiped down a table near the piano room, he overheard a group laughing nearby. They were talking about music, about talent shows, about famous performers. Someone joked that anyone could sit at a piano and pretend to be good. Another voice laughed and said even the janitor could probably play. The laughter echoed louder than it should have. He felt his face grow warm, but he didn't react. He kept cleaning, eyes lowered. He had heard worse before. Words like that stopped surprising him. Still, something inside him shifted. That night, after his shift ended, he stayed back longer than usual. The building grew quiet. Lights dimmed. The noise faded. He walked past the piano room again. This time he stopped. He didn't go inside. He just stood there, listening to the silence. His fingers moved slightly in the air, pressing invisible keys. Muscle memory woke up, gentle and familiar. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine sitting there, playing without fear, without judgment. Just sound and feeling. Then he shook his head and walked away. Because people like him weren't meant for moments like that. At least, that's what the world had taught him. The next day, the building was busier than usual. There was an event planned. Chairs were arranged. People dressed better. Voices were louder. Excitement filled the air. He worked around them, careful not to get in the way. Someone asked him to clean near the piano room again. As he finished, he noticed the piano was uncovered, polished, ready to be played. His heart beat faster. He told himself it meant nothing. Still, he stayed nearby longer than needed. He didn't know it yet, but his quiet life was moving toward a moment that would change how people saw him forever. And it all began with the man no one noticed. That evening, after the building emptied and the noise faded, he returned to his small room. It was quiet there too, but in a different way. The kind of quiet that settles into the walls and stays. He placed his cleaning gloves on a chair, washed his hands slowly, and sat near the window where a weak streetlight came through. This was the time of day when memories became louder. He didn't own a piano. He hadn't owned one for many years, but his fingers still remembered the feel of the keys. Sometimes he placed his hands on the table and imagined the notes. Left hand steady, right hand light. His shoulders relaxed as if the music itself was giving him permission to breathe. Music had once been his escape. When he was younger, life was hard but hopeful. He grew up in a place where money was always short and worries came early. Still, there were moments of beauty. Old radios playing soft tunes. Someone humming while cooking. A broken piano in a community hall that most people ignored. That piano changed him. It was out of tune and missing a few keys, but to him it was magic. He would wait until the hall was empty, then sit and play whatever he remembered or felt. He didn't have formal lessons at first. He learned by listening, by repeating, by feeling the sound in his chest. People noticed back then. They said he had something special. Some encouraged him to continue. A few even talked about opportunities, performances, a future shaped by music. But life doesn't always move in straight lines. As years passed, responsibilities grew heavier. Family needed help. Bills arrived faster than chances. Dreams that didn't bring money felt like luxuries he could no longer afford. So he stepped away. Not because he stopped loving music, but because he loved his family more. He told himself he would return one day, that the piano would wait. But days became years. Now, sitting alone in his room, he wondered when exactly that distance had grown so wide. He wondered if the part of him that played so freely still existed, or if it had faded with time. The next morning, he returned to work as usual. The building buzzed with activity. People talked about the upcoming event. The performers expected to arrive later. There was excitement in the air. He moved quietly through it all. While cleaning near the piano room, he heard someone practicing briefly, then stopping in frustration. A few wrong notes. A sigh. The sound echoed in the empty space. Without thinking, he paused. His body reacted before his mind could stop it. His fingers twitched, wanting to correct the notes, wanting to finish the melody properly. But he stepped back. This wasn't his place anymore. Later, during his break, he sat with his tea again. His eyes followed the crowd moving past him. Some people carried instruments. Others talked loudly about music, talent, and nerves. No one looked at him. He noticed how easily people judged what they saw. Nice clothes meant importance. Instruments meant skill. Uniforms like his meant background noise. He had learned not to fight that image. In the afternoon, he was asked to clean the piano room once more. As he wiped the surface carefully, he felt a familiar pull. The piano was warm now, used recently. The keys looked inviting, almost alive. For a brief second, he rested his hand on the edge. The touch sent a rush through him. He pulled away quickly, checking to see if anyone had noticed. No one had. Still, his heart raced. He spent the rest of the day distracted. His mind replayed melodies he hadn't thought about in years. Songs tied to memories, to moments when life felt simpler. As evening came, he found himself near the piano room again. A few people were gathered nearby, talking and laughing while waiting for the event to start. Someone joked about warming up the audience. Another laughed and said anyone could try. His stomach tightened. He knew that tone. He had heard it before. The kind that turns people into jokes without caring who gets hurt. He kept his head down, pretending not to listen. Inside, something stirred. That night, back in his room, he couldn't sleep. His hands ached in a way that had nothing to do with cleaning. His mind was restless, full of unfinished songs. He thought about all the times he stayed silent to avoid embarrassment. All the chances he let pass because he believed people like him weren't meant to be seen. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of hiding. Before sleep finally came, he made a quiet promise to himself. Not to perform. Not to prove anything. Just to stop running from who he was. He didn't know how or when. Only that something inside him refused to stay buried any longer. The next day would bring that moment closer. And soon, the piano would no longer stay silent. The room filled faster than expected. Chairs scraped the floor as people took their seats. Voices blended into one loud sound, full of excitement and impatience. Some people stood near the walls, checking their phones, laughing, pointing toward the front where the piano waited under bright lights. He moved quietly along the edge of the crowd, pushing his cart out of the way. His job was almost done for the day, but he stayed close, pretending to wipe surfaces that were already clean. He told himself it was just work, nothing more, but his eyes kept drifting toward the piano. It looked different now, not like the quiet instrument he passed every day. It stood in the center, uncovered, polished, almost proud. The keys reflected the lights above, each one waiting. He felt a tightness in his chest. People nearby talked about music as if it were something easy. They argued about styles, about famous players, about who was the best. Some spoke with confidence, others with loud opinions that carried across the room. Then someone noticed him standing there. A voice, half joking, half careless, said something about letting the janitor try first. Laughter followed. It wasn't cruel laughter, not exactly. It was the kind that came from comfort, from believing nothing serious would happen. Still, it hit him harder than he expected. A few people turned to look at him. Some smiled. Some raised their eyebrows. Others watched as if waiting for a reaction. He felt his face warm. For a moment, he considered walking away. That was his usual choice. Quiet exit. No trouble. No shame. But his feet didn't move. Someone else spoke, louder this time, encouraging him in a playful way. Not mean but not respectful either. The words sounded like a dare wrapped in a joke. The attention felt heavy. He looked down at his hands. They were rough from work, fingers marked by years of cleaning, lifting, fixing small things no one noticed. These were not hands people expected to make music. His heart beat faster. He remembered the promise he made to himself the night before. Not to prove anything. Not to impress anyone. Just to stop running. Slowly, he took a step forward. The laughter softened into murmurs. Some people leaned in. Others shook their heads, already sure of the outcome. He reached the piano and stood there for a moment. The bench felt lower than he remembered. The room felt too bright, too full. He hesitated. In that pause, doubt rushed in. Thoughts of failure, of embarrassment, of becoming the story people would repeat later for fun. Then he placed his hands on the keys. The feeling was familiar, like greeting an old friend after many years apart. His shoulders relaxed without him realizing it. His breathing slowed. The room grew quiet. First, he didn't play. He closed his eyes. He let the noise fade. The laughter, the whispers, the expectations. When he finally pressed the first key, the sound was soft, careful. A simple note, steady and clear. Someone coughed in the back. He continued. The melody began slowly, almost shy. Notes spaced apart, giving the room time to listen. Time to adjust. A few people exchanged looks. Then the music grew. His fingers moved with confidence now, guided by memory and feeling rather than thought. The melody carried warmth, sadness, hope, all woven together. It wasn't flashy. It was honest. The room changed. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Smiles faded into focus. He played as if he were alone. The years fell away. The small room at home. The long shifts. The silence. All of it disappeared. There was only the piano. Each note told a piece of his story. The struggle. The patience. The quiet strength built over time. The love that never left. even when it was hidden. People felt it. They leaned forward without realizing it. Some held their breath. Others felt something tighten in their chest. No one laughed now. When the final note faded, the room stayed silent. For a long second, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon, the sound filled the room, louder than the laughter that had come before. Applause rose from every corner. Not polite, not forced, but real. He opened his eyes. He stood up slowly, unsure of what to do next. His hands trembled slightly. He nodded once, a small gesture, and stepped away from the piano. People looked at him differently now. Some with surprise, some with respect, some with regret. He picked up his cart and moved toward the exit, his heart still racing. Behind him, the room buzzed with disbelief. They had laughed, and then they had listened. Nothing would be the same after this moment. The applause followed him even as he moved away from the piano. It echoed in his ears, mixing with the sound of his own breathing. He kept his head down, not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't know how to hold all those eyes on him at once. Moments ago, he had been invisible. Now, people turned their bodies to watch him walk past. He felt strange, like he was wearing someone else's life for a moment. Near the doorway, he stopped. Not by choice, but because someone gently called out to him. The voice was calm, respectful, nothing like the jokes from earlier. He turned slowly. Several people stood there, unsure of what to say next. Their faces looked different now. Softer, thoughtful. A few smiled, not the kind that laughs, but the kind that thanks without words. Someone asked where he learned to play. The question caught him off guard. For years, no one had asked him anything about himself. People asked him to clean here, fix that, move this. Never about who he was before the uniform. He answered simply. A long time ago, he said. That was all. He didn't explain the nights of practice, the choices made, the dreams delayed. Those stories felt private, too heavy to share in a crowded room. Another person thanked him for the music, said it meant something, said it reminded them of home, or of someone they missed. He nodded again, unsure how to respond. Then someone else spoke, louder this time, and said they were sorry for laughing. The room went quiet again. He looked at the person who spoke. There was no anger in his chest, no desire to make anyone feel small. He had carried enough of that weight already. It's okay, he said, and he meant it. After that, the moment slowly loosened. People returned to their seats. Conversations resumed, but the tone had changed. Softer, more careful. He stepped outside into the cool air. The night felt wider than usual. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs fully for the first time in a long while. As he walked toward the bus stop, memories followed him, but they no longer hurt. They felt lighter, like reminders instead of regrets. At home, he sat by the window again. This time, his hands rested quietly in his lap. No imaginary keys, no restless movement. He slept deeply that night. The next day, the building felt different. People greeted him. Not everyone, but more than before. Some smiled. Some nodded with purpose. A few stopped to talk, asking simple questions about music, about his day. He answered politely, still reserved, but something inside him had shifted. He stood a little straighter. His steps felt firmer. The piano room was quiet again, but it didn't feel distant anymore. During his break, he noticed a small group gathered nearby, talking about the performance from the night before. They spoke about how unexpected it was, how powerful, how they never saw it coming. He listened quietly, not stepping in. One person said something that stayed with him. It makes you think, they said, about how many people we walk past without really seeing. He felt a gentle warmth in his chest. Later that week, someone asked if he would play again sometime. The question surprised him more than the applause had. He didn't answer right away. He went home that night and sat in the dark, thinking about age, about fear, about whether it was too late to let music be part of his life again. He realized something then. It was never about being seen. It was about being honest with himself. The piano had never left him. He had just stopped giving himself permission. The following days passed quietly. He returned to his routine, but it no longer felt like a cage. Felt like a chapter. Sometimes, after work, he stopped by a small public hall near his home. Inside was an old piano, not perfect, slightly worn. He sat and played. No crowd, no laughter, no applause, just music. And that was enough. What happened that day didn't turn him into someone famous. It didn't change his job overnight. But it changed something more important. It reminded people that talent doesn't announce itself. And it reminded him that his story was not finished yet. Days turned into weeks, and the moment at the piano settled into memory, but it never truly faded. It lived quietly in the building, in the way people spoke a little softer, in how they paused before making jokes. It lived inside him too, steady and warm, like a light he could finally see. He returned to his routine, but the routine felt different now. He still arrived early. He still cleaned the floors and wiped the glass. The work was the same, but his heart was not. He no longer moved as if he were trying to disappear. People noticed. Some mornings, someone would ask how his day was going. Others would ask if he had played anywhere else since that night. He answered simply, never trying to make himself sound bigger than he was. I play when I can, he would say, and that was true. In the evenings, after work, he continued visiting the small public hall near his home. The old piano waited there, patient and familiar. He played for himself, for the walls, for the empty chairs. Sometimes a few people wandered in and listened quietly. Sometimes no one came at all. He didn't mind. Music had returned to its rightful place. Not as a dream of applause, but as a companion. One evening, a young worker from the building recognized him at the hall. They sat nearby, listening without speaking. When he finished, the person thanked him and said they had never thought about how much life someone could carry without showing it. He smiled gently. That comment stayed with him. He realized then that his story was no longer just his. It had become a mirror for others, a reminder that people are more than their titles, more than what they wear to work. At the building, the piano room remained open more often. People used it with care now. Sometimes, during lunch breaks, he was invited to play again. Sometimes he declined. Sometimes he agreed. Each time, the room listened. There was no laughter anymore. He never corrected anyone who assumed he was just lucky, or that the moment had been a surprise. He knew the truth. Luck had nothing to do with it. Neither did magic. It was years of love, patience, and quiet persistence. One afternoon, as he cleaned near the entrance, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. Two people were talking about another worker someone often ignored, someone joked about often. One of them stopped mid-sentence. Maybe we shouldn't assume, they said. He continued cleaning, but his eyes grew heavy. Change does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters softly and stays. At home, he began sorting through old things. Papers, photos, notes from a time when music filled every corner of his life. He didn't feel regret anymore, only gratitude that he had found his way back. He framed one old photo and placed it near the window, not to remember who he used to be, but to honor who he had always been. The building eventually hosted another event. This time, his role was different. He was asked ahead of time if he would like to play. He thought about it. He agreed. When he sat at the piano that night, there was no tension. No need to prove anything. The room was ready and so was he. He played with ease, with calm, with honesty. When he finished, the applause was warm and brief, just enough. He stood, nodded, and returned to his work. Because music was part of his life now, not the center of it. And that balance mattered. As time passed, the story spread beyond the building. Not as a viral tale, not as a headline, but as something shared quietly. A reminder passed from person to person. People spoke about the janitor who played the piano. But more importantly, they spoke about what it made them feel. Years later, when he looked back on that day, he didn't remember the laughter as much as he remembered the silence that followed. The moment when people listened, truly listened. That silence was respect. He understood something then that he wished everyone could learn. No one is just one thing. Behind every uniform is a story. Behind every quiet face is a life filled with effort, loss, and hope. Some talents shine early, others wait, and sometimes, all it takes is one brave moment to remind the world. He never stopped being the janitor, but he also never stopped being a musician, and that made all the difference.